have a crush on my dad's childhood best friend since I was 9. I'm not asking to be judged, but want to share my story. The first time I knew it wasn't just a crush. I was 9 years old the first time I realized I loved him. Not in the dramatic, fireworks kind of way. Not the kind they show in movies. It was quieter than that, softer, more dangerous. It was the way I waited for the sound of his car in the driveway. Adrian never knocked. He'd walk straight in, calling out, "Victor, if you're cooking again, I'm leaving." And my father would yell back something sarcastic from the kitchen. They had been best friends since they were 18. Same university, same stupid stories, same inside jokes that made no sense to anyone else. To me, Adrian was just part of the house. But even at 9, I knew he wasn't like the other adults. He didn't talk to me like I was small. He asked me what I thought about things. When I told him I wanted to be a writer one day, he didn't laugh. He didn't say, "That's cute." He asked what I would write about. People, I said. What about them? Why'd they lie? He smiled at me then. A slow, impressed kind of smile. That's a good question to chase. That was the moment. That was when something planted itself inside me. My father, Victor, was loud, larger than life, always the center of the room. He loved me fiercely, but he showed it with teasing and noise. Adrian was quiet. When he listened, he really listened. Like the world slowed down around him. Sometimes I'd sit on the living room floor doing homework, while he and my dad drank beer and argued about politics. Adrian would randomly ask, "Elena, who do you think is right?" My dad would protest, "Don't drag her into this." But Adrian would grin. "She's smarter than both of us." And I would glow for hours afterward. I didn't know what that feeling was. I just knew I wanted it again. I was 13 when things shifted. Not with him. With me. Puberty hit like a truck. Suddenly I was aware of my body, of how I looked, of how boys at school looked at me. I hated it. But when Adrian walked in one evening and paused for half a second before saying, "You're getting tall," something electric ran through me. It wasn't inappropriate. It wasn't lingering. It was normal. But my brain wouldn't let it be normal. That night I lay awake thinking about the way his voice had sounded. And I realized something terrifying. I didn't want boys at school to look at me. I wanted him to. Guilt. The guilt came fast. He was my dad's best friend. He'd known me since I was born. He had carried me on his shoulders. The feeling felt wrong, dirty, like I had crossed a line in my own mind. So I buried it. Or I tried to. I dated boys. Normal boys, age-appropriate boys. Awkward kisses behind movie theaters. Hand-holding in hallways. Every time one of them leaned in to kiss me, I'd compare it. Not consciously, but I'd feel disappointed. They were loud, impatient, self-absorbed. Adrian was steady, grounded, safe, and that was the most dangerous part. When I turned 16, Adrian started coming around less. Not drastically, just enough for me to notice. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Then one night, I overheard something. "My dad, you've been busy lately." Adrian, "Yeah, Dad, or avoiding my house." A pause. Adrian laughed it off. "Don't flatter yourself." But there was something in his tone. I didn't understand it then. Now I do. He wasn't avoiding my dad. He was adjusting to the fact that I wasn't a child anymore. And that terrified him. At 17, I knew my feelings weren't going away. I had matured. I had grown into myself. I was no longer the awkward teenager desperate for validation. I knew what attraction felt like. I knew what admiration felt like. What I felt for Adrian was layered. It wasn't just physical. It was intellectual. It was the way he treated my mother with respect. The way he stepped back so my father could shine. The way he never competed. He dated occasionally. Women my mom's age. Elegant, composed women. Every time he brought one around, something sharp twisted inside my chest. I told myself it was childish jealousy, but it didn't feel childish. It felt territorial. The night everything shifted. 3 months before my 18th birthday, my parents hosted a dinner party. I wore a simple black dress. Nothing provocative. Just different from the usual jeans and oversized sweaters. When Adrian walked in, he froze for half a second. Just a second. But I caught it. He recovered immediately, smiled, complimented my mom's cooking, teased my dad. But later, when I was in the kitchen alone pouring water, he stepped in quietly. "You look grown," he said carefully. My heart slammed against my ribs. "I am." A beat of silence. "Almost," he corrected gently. There it was. The line. Clear, firm, ethical. He wasn't tempted. He wasn't conflicted. He was aware. And he was waiting. That realization didn't discourage me. It solidified something. If I still felt this way at 18, then it wasn't a phase. My 18th birthday. The morning I turned 18, I woke up with a strange calm. Not excitement, not rebellion, just certainty. I had spent years analyzing this feeling, dissecting it, trying to invalidate it. But philosophy teaches you something important. Feelings aren't arguments, they're data. And the data said this wasn't infatuation anymore. It was choice. That evening, my parents threw a small party. Friends, family, Adrian. He brought me a book. First edition of my favorite author. Inside the cover he wrote, "For Elena who asks better questions than most adults." My hands shook when I read it. Later, when everyone was distracted with cake, I found him on the back porch. "You didn't have to get me that," I said. "I wanted to." "Why?" "I wanted to." "Why?" He looked confused. "Because you matter." And something inside me snapped into place. I wasn't going to seduce him. I wasn't going to manipulate anything. I was going to tell the truth. The decision. People think turning 18 is like flipping a switch. It isn't. You don't wake up magically wiser, but you do wake up responsible. Responsible for what you choose. And I chose this. I choose to risk embarrassment, rejection, chaos, because living in silence felt worse. I didn't tell him that night. I waited a week. A whole week of rehearsing words in my head. A whole week of imagining him laughing. Or worse, looking disappointed. But I couldn't carry it anymore. So when he came over the following Friday to watch a game with my dad, I followed him into the kitchen. "Adrian," I said, and my voice didn't shake like I thought it would. He turned. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a child standing in front of him. I felt like a woman making a decision. "I need to tell you something." His expression shifted immediately. Guarded. Careful. He already knew. And that's where everything began. He didn't interrupt me. That was the first thing I noticed. Adrian had always been the type to step in gently when conversations were about to go somewhere uncomfortable. He redirected. He softened. He diffused. But this time, he just stood there, waiting. The kitchen light above us buzzed faintly. The sound of the television from the living room carried my father's laughter. Through the house, everything felt normal, except my pulse. "I've had feelings for you for a long time," I said. There it was. No drama. No seduction. No trembling theatrics. Just truth. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Elena," he began carefully. "The way someone approaches a wounded animal. You just turned 18. I know. And I'm your father's best friend. I know that too." He exhaled slowly and leaned back against the counter, crossing his arms, not defensive, just bracing himself. "You don't understand what you're saying." "I do," I insisted. "I'm not confused. I'm not bored. I'm not trying to prove anything." He searched my face, probably looking for signs of immaturity, for a crack, for some evidence that this was a phase he could gently dismiss. "You grew up with me," he said quietly. "I watched you learn to ride a bike. I know. I've known you your entire life, and I've known you mine." That's exactly the problem. Silence stretched between us. I stepped closer, not touching him, but close enough that he could see I wasn't shrinking back. "You didn't groom me," I said softly. "You didn't encourage anything. These feelings are mine. I'm choosing them." His eyes darkened at the word choosing. "Choice doesn't erase context," he said. "There's history here. There's loyalty," I corrected. He flinched slightly at that. "Yes," he said. "There's loyalty. To my father." I knew that was the real wall. Not my age. Not society. My dad. Victor trusted him, completely, blindly. The kind of trust that only exists after decades of shared mistakes and forgiveness. I saw the war in Adrian's face, and for a moment, I hated my father for being the reason. "That's it," I asked quietly. "You don't feel anything." His eyes snapped back to mine. "That's not the point. That wasn't my question." His throat moved as he swallowed. "Elena, I will not disrespect your father. That's not what I asked." His voice hardened slightly. "You deserve someone who doesn't carry this kind of baggage. Answer the question." He looked away. That was my answer. He felt something, and that terrified him. "I'm going to forget you said this," he said finally. "And you're going to date boys your age. And in a year, you'll look back and laugh." "I won't." "You will." "I won't," I repeated. He pushed off the counter, creating space between us. "I'm not doing this," he said firmly. Then he walked back into the living room like nothing had happened. I stood there alone, staring at the spot he'd been standing. Rejection would have hurt less if it had been absolute, if he had looked at me with nothing. But he hadn't. He'd looked like a man standing at the edge of a cliff and choosing not to jump. The distance started the next week. He stopped coming by spontaneously. When he did come over, he stayed outside with my dad. Shorter visits. No lingering conversations. If I entered a room, he found a reason to leave it. He wasn't punishing me. He was protecting himself, which somehow hurt more. My father noticed, of course. "Adrian's been weird lately," he said one night while washing dishes. "Midlife crisis? Maybe." I forced a shrug. "Maybe he's just busy." My mom glanced at me from across the kitchen. She noticed more than she let on. Marianne had always been observant in a quiet way. She read people the way other women read magazines. Subtle shifts, tension, silence. Sometimes I wondered if she already knew. Weeks passed. I tried to act normal. I went out with friends. I let a boy from my philosophy class take me on 2 dates. He was kind, intelligent, safe. When he kissed me, I felt nothing but comparison. That night, lying in bed, I admitted something uncomfortable to myself. It wasn't just attraction. It was alignment. Adrian challenged me, matched me, saw me. Boys my age were still figuring themselves out. He already had. And that difference wasn't just age. It was gravity. 3 months after my confession, I saw him alone for the first time. I had gone to a bookstore downtown, hoping to distract myself. I was flipping through a collection of essays when I heard his voice behind me. You always did hover too long in one aisle. I froze. Slowly, I turned. He looked surprised genuinely, like he hadn't expected to see me either. He was wearing a dark jacket, sleeves rolled up slightly, casual, unprepared. For a second, we just stared at each other. Then he cleared his throat. Have you been? Fine. University. Good. The conversation felt brittle, artificial. He gestured toward the book in my hand. Still chasing why people lie. Always. A faint smile tugged at his mouth. We stood there in the philosophy section like two people, pretending we weren't, thinking about the same thing. I didn't mean to make things awkward. I said finally. You didn't, he replied. You disappeared. I needed space. From me. Yes. There was no anger in his tone, just honesty. Did it help? I asked. He hesitated. No. That single word shifted something between us. He hadn't forgotten. He hadn't dismissed it. He had tried. And failed. Elena, he said quietly, lowering his voice as someone passed us. You have to understand what you're asking of me. I'm not asking you to betray anyone. It would feel like betrayal. To who? My father. Yes. I studied his face. Do you think he owns me? That's not what this is. Then what is it? It's loyalty. It's fear. I said softly. His jaw tightened. Of what? Of wanting something you think you shouldn't. His eyes flickered. And for the first time since I turned 18, I saw something raw there. Not temptation. Conflict. You're young, he said again, but it sounded weaker this time. I'm an adult. You're barely one. Would you say that to any other 18-year-old woman? He didn't answer, because he wouldn't. The truth was complicated. If I were a stranger, a woman he met at a cafe, this would not be a moral dilemma. But I wasn't a stranger. I was history. We stood there in silence, surrounded by shelves of arguments about ethics and autonomy and social contracts. I almost laughed at the irony. You don't get to decide what I feel, I said quietly. And you don't get to decide I'll grow out of it. And you don't get to decide that this wouldn't change everything. He was right. It would. My father would feel betrayed. Friends would whisper. The age gap would be dissected. It would be messy. But messy didn't mean wrong. I'm not asking you to choose right now, I said finally. Good. I'm asking you not to pretend there's nothing here. His gaze locked onto mine. The air between us felt heavier than it had any right to in a public bookstore. There's something, he admitted quietly. The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. Not dramatic, not explosive, but undeniable. And that's why, he continued, voice tight, I have to be the adult here. I felt a flash of irritation at that. I am an adult. I know, but I've been one longer. Then act like it. I shot back. Don't run. His expression shifted at that. I'm not running. You are. You think distance will make this disappear. It should, but it hasn't. Silence. He looked at me the way someone looks at a locked door they're debating opening. Elena, he said softly, I don't want to hurt you. Then don't. It's not that simple. It is. It's not, he repeated firmly. Because if he let himself step toward me, even slightly, there would be no pretending this was harmless. And he knew that. I saw the moment he pulled himself back, the restraint settling over him like armor. I need to go, he said. And this time, he didn't linger. He walked away. But the difference was clear. He hadn't rejected me. Not really. He was fighting himself. And I was patient. Because if there's one thing I learned from watching him my entire life, it's that Adrian only resists the things that matter. After the bookstore, something subtle changed. He didn't disappear again. That would have been easier. Instead, he reappeared slowly, cautiously, like someone testing ice he wasn't sure would hold. He came over to the house the following Sunday to watch a game with my dad. I heard his voice in the living room before I saw him, and my stomach tightened the way it always did now. Not nerves, awareness. I walked in deliberately this time. No hesitation. No pretending I hadn't heard him. Hey, I said casually. Both men looked up. My dad grinned. There she is. Come educate us again. Adrian didn't smile immediately, but he didn't look away either. Hi, Elena. Just my name, but softer than necessary. I sat in the armchair across from him instead of on the floor like I used to. A small shift. A visual one. He noticed. Of course he did. The game played in the background while my dad ranted about referees. I barely registered it. I was hyper-aware of the way Adrian's knee bounced slightly when he was thinking. The way he rubbed his thumb against his jaw when he was unsettled. He was unsettled. Not panicked. Not avoiding. just conscious. And I realized something important in that moment. The power dynamic had shifted. When I was younger, he had always been steady while I reacted. Now I was calm, and he was the one calculating every word. It wasn't manipulation. It was equality. Later that evening, my dad went upstairs to take a phone call, leaving the two of us alone in the living room. The silence stretched. "You're playing a dangerous game," Adrian said quietly, eyes still on the television. "I'm sitting in a chair." He glanced at me then. "You know what I mean? I'm not doing anything. That's the problem." I tilted my head. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You're being patient. And patience works." There it was. An admission without being one. I folded my hands in my lap. "I'm not trying to trap you." "I know. Then what are you afraid of?" He didn't answer immediately. The television crowd roared as someone scored, but neither of us reacted. "I'm afraid," he said finally, voice low, "that if I stop resisting, I won't stop at all." The honesty in that statement stole my breath. He wasn't worried about temptation. He was worried about depth. "You think I'm fragile," I said. "No." "You think I'll regret it?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I'm almost 40. And you're just starting your life." I held his gaze. "You don't get to decide what kind of life I want." He inhaled sharply through his nose. "Do you hear yourself?" he asked. "This is exactly why you what? Why I need to keep distance. Because I challenge you. Because you make this complicated." The word complicated lingered between us. "I'm not a complication," I said quietly. He finally turned fully toward me. "You're my best friend's daughter. And that should be enough." It isn't. The rawness in my voice surprised both of us. It wasn't defiance. It was frustration. Years of quiet wanting pressed into one moment. "I didn't ask for this," I continued more softly. "I tried to grow out of it. I tried to redirect it. It didn't go away." His eyes searched mine again. "And you think that means something?" "Yes. Feelings aren't proof of destiny." "I know that," I said. "But they're proof of choice." He stared at me like I'd just struck him. Choice. The word unsettled him every time. Because it removed the narrative that I was naive. That I was confused. That this was some teenage projection. "I don't want to be your rebellion," he said. "You're not." "I don't want to be the older man you experiment with." "You're not." "I don't want to be the reason your father looks at me differently." That one landed heavier. Because that was real. "You don't know that he would," I said. He almost laughed at that. "Victor would kill me." "No, he wouldn't. He would feel betrayed." "Why?" I pressed. "Because I chose you." "Yes, that's not ownership. That's ego." His jaw tightened again. "You're asking me to risk a 30-year friendship. I'm asking you to consider me as an adult." "I do consider you." "Then stop talking like I'm temporary." Silence. Long. Waited. I saw something shift behind his eyes, then not surrender. Not yet, but recalibration. He was no longer dismissing the possibility outright. He was assessing the cost. And that meant he was imagining it. That night after he left, my dad made an offhand comment while pouring himself a drink. "You and Adrian argue like you're married already." I froze. "What?" He chuckled. "You both get that same stubborn look." I forced a laugh. "Maybe I just inherited your bad taste in friends." He grinned. "You could do worse." The irony was almost unbearable. The following weeks felt like a slow tightening of a thread neither of us was cutting. We didn't flirt. We didn't touch. But we stopped pretending there was nothing beneath the surface. He would hold eye contact a second longer than necessary. I would stand closer than politeness required. The air between us felt charged but contained. Until the night it didn't. It was raining. Hard. My parents had gone out to dinner with neighbors. I stayed home, claiming I had reading to finish. Around 8, there was a knock at the door. Not the usual walk-in. A knock. When I opened it, Adrian stood there, soaked, hair damp, jacket darkened by rain. "I was driving by," he said, which was clearly not true. "Victor forgot his laptop earlier." My heart thudded. "Come in." He stepped inside, water dripping onto the hardwood. The house felt different with just the two of us in it. Quieter. Intentional. I handed him the laptop from the kitchen counter. He took it, but he didn't leave. The rain hammered against the windows. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "You came." His eyes flicked to mine. "Yes." We stood there in the kitchen, the same room where I'd confessed months earlier. Except now the tension wasn't one-sided. It was mutual. Thick. "I keep thinking," he said slowly, "that this will fade." It hasn't. "No." "And that scares you." "Yes." The honesty was almost brutal. He set the laptop down on the counter without looking away from me. "You don't understand what this does to me," he said. "Then explain it." His hand dragged through his damp hair in frustration. "I have spent years being careful with you," he said. "Years making sure I never crossed the line. And now you're standing in front of me asking me to redraw it." "I'm not asking you to erase it," I said softly. "I'm asking you to acknowledge it's moved." His breath hitched slightly at that. The rain seemed louder. The house smaller. "You deserve someone uncomplicated," he said again, but weaker this time. Maybe I just inherited your bad taste in friends. He grinned. You could do worse. The irony was almost unbearable. The following weeks felt like a slow tightening of a thread neither of us was cutting. We didn't flirt. We didn't touch. But we stopped pretending there was nothing beneath the surface. He would hold eye contact a second longer than necessary. I would stand closer than politeness required. The air between us felt charged but contained. Until the night it didn't. It was raining. Hard. My parents had gone out to dinner with neighbors. I stayed home, claiming I had reading to finish. Around 8, there was a knock at the door. Not the usual walk-in. A knock. When I opened it, Adrian stood there soaked, hair damp, jacket darkened by rain. I was driving by, he said, which was clearly not true. Victor forgot his laptop earlier. My heart thudded. Come in. He stepped inside, water dripping onto the hardwood. The house felt different with just the two of us in it. Quieter. Intentional. I handed him the laptop from the kitchen counter. He took it, but he didn't leave. The rain hammered against the windows. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. You came. His eyes flicked to mine. Yes. We stood there in the kitchen, the same room where I'd confessed months earlier. Except now the tension wasn't one-sided. It was mutual. Thick. I keep thinking, he said slowly, that this will fade. It hasn't. No. And that scares you. Yes. The honesty was almost brutal. He set the laptop down on the counter without looking away from me. You don't understand what this does to me, he said. Then explain it. His hand dragged through his damp hair in frustration. I have spent years being careful with you, he said. Years making sure I never crossed the line. And now you're standing in front of me asking me to redraw it. I'm not asking you to erase it, I said softly. I'm asking you to acknowledge it's moved. His breath hitched slightly at that. The rain seemed louder. The house smaller. You deserve someone uncomplicated, he said again, but weaker this time. And you deserve to stop pretending you don't want this. The word want hung heavy. He took a step back like it physically hit him. You think this is easy for me? He asked. No. You think I enjoy fighting myself every time I'm in the same room as you? My pulse spiked. You're fighting. Yes. That admission changed everything. Because it meant I wasn't alone in this. The room felt charged, like the air before lightning strikes. He looked at me like he was memorizing my face. You're not a child, he said quietly. And that's the problem. I'm not a problem. Your temptation. The word slid down my spine. Not because it was seductive, but because it was honest. And you're afraid if you let yourself choose it. I said, you won't stop. His silence was confirmation. The space between us felt smaller without either of us moving. He lifted his hand, hesitated, then dropped it. I can't, he whispered. Not won't. Can't. Which meant the barrier wasn't indifference. It was fear. Then don't, I said, even though every part of me wanted him to. He looked at me sharply, confused. I don't want you to choose me out of pressure, I continued. Or because I pushed long enough. I want you to choose me because you can't not. The room fell silent except for the storm. Something flickered in his expression, then not resistance. Recognition. He took one slow step closer. Close enough that I could see the tension in his jaw. Close enough that if either of us leaned forward, the line would vanish. Elena, he said softly, almost warning. But he didn't step back. And for the first time since I turned 18, he didn't leave. He didn't leave. That was the first real shift. Up until that night, Adrian had always been the one to retreat first. The one to reestablish distance. The one to restore order before anything could tip too far. But now he was standing close enough that I could feel the warmth from his skin through the thin fabric of my shirt. The rain hadn't slowed. Neither had my heartbeat. Elena, he said again, softer this time. Not as a warning. More like he was testing how my name felt in the air between us. Yes, you don't know what you're asking. I'm not asking you to promise forever, I replied. I'm asking you to be honest. I have been honest. Not completely. His jaw flexed. You think I haven't noticed? I continued. The way you leave rooms when I enter them. The way you don't look at me for too long. That isn't indifference. It's self-control. Why do you need self-control unless there's something to control? Silence. He exhaled slowly, like a man deciding whether to step into fire voluntarily. Because, he said finally, if I stop controlling it, I won't treat this lightly. My breath caught. That's supposed to scare me. It should. Why? Because I don't do casual. The confession wasn't flashy. It wasn't dramatic. But it landed heavy. He wasn't afraid of a fling. He was afraid of meaning. You think I do? I asked quietly. He studied my face again, searching for signs of recklessness, for impulsiveness, for youth. You're 18. And the world is new to you. It's not new. It's just wider. He almost smiled at that. You always argue like this, he muttered. You like that. His eyes darkened slightly. That's not helping. The tension between us wasn't frantic. It wasn't rushed. It felt like two tectonic plates pressing slowly against each other. I didn't reach for him. He didn't reach for me. But neither of us stepped back. Say it, I said quietly. Say what? That you feel it. His expression shifted a flicker of irritation, maybe at himself. You want me to say it out loud? Yes. He stared at me for a long moment. The kind of look that feels like it's peeling layers back. I feel it, he said finally. There was no embellishment, no softening, just truth. Something inside my chest loosened and tightened at the same time. And I whispered. And that doesn't mean I act on it. Why? Because feelings don't override consequences. I'm not a consequence. You would be, he said sharply. If this goes wrong. That word hung in the air. Wrong. Why would it go wrong? He ran a hand over his face, frustrated. Because I'm almost twice your age. You're not. It's close enough. My mom is 17 years younger than my dad. That's different. Why? He hesitated. Because they met as adults. I am an adult. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Technically, I was right. But this wasn't about technicalities. This was about history. He had seen me grow up, but he had never looked at me like this before. That mattered. I didn't see you that way, he said quietly, as if reading my thoughts. Not until recently. I held my breath. When recently? He hesitated. That night at your birthday party, he admitted. When you walked into the room, my pulse thudded in my ears. What changed? You did. The simplicity of it made my chest ache. I didn't wake up wanting this, he continued. It crept up on me, and I ignored it, because I thought it was temporary. And now I'm not sure. The honesty was almost unbearable. The house felt too small to contain the weight of the conversation. You're not unsure about me, I said softly. You're unsure about the fallout. His eyes flickered. That's part of it. And the other part? He stepped back then, just slightly. Is that I don't want to be the reason you limit your life. The assumption stung. You think choosing you would limit me? I think it would change your trajectory. So with choosing anyone? Yes, but this. He gestured vaguely between us. This comes with complications you don't fully understand yet. Then explain them. Your father. Stop hiding behind him. I'm not hiding. You are. His expression hardened slightly. Loyalty isn't hiding. Neither is cowardice. The word hit. Hard. His eyes flashed. You think I'm a coward? I think you're scared. And you're not. No, I said honestly. Because I wasn't. Not of him. Not of us. I was scared of never knowing. The rain outside began to soften, like the storm was losing energy. Inside, the air still crackled. If we cross this line, he said slowly, there's no going back. I know. You might lose people. I might. You might resent me. I won't. You can't promise that. Neither can you promise you won't regret walking away. That landed. He stared at me like I had just handed him a dilemma he couldn't solve with logic. I need time, he said finally. For what? To figure out whether this is real. It is. For you. For you too. He didn't deny it. And that was the first time I realized something crucial. He wasn't questioning whether he felt something. He was questioning whether he had the right to. There's a difference. The sound of tires on wet pavement made us both glance toward the window. Headlights flashed briefly across the living room wall. My parents. We stepped apart instinctively. Not guiltily. Just aware. He grabbed the laptop from the counter. I'm not running, he said quietly before moving toward the door. I know. I just need to think. Then think. He paused at the doorway. And Elena. Yes. If I stepped toward you. He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. He left before I could respond. That night, I lay awake replaying every second. Not because I doubted him, but because I had seen it clearly now. He wasn't immune. He wasn't indifferent. He was holding himself back with discipline that was starting to crack. And discipline doesn't last forever when it's fighting desire. The next few weeks were strange. He didn't avoid me, but he didn't seek me out either. When he came over, the tension was quieter, less sharp, more simmering. We moved around each other carefully. Measured. Intentional. My dad remained blissfully unaware. Or so I thought. One evening, while Adrian was in the backyard helping him fix something on the fence, I stood by the kitchen window watching them. My mom joined me silently. You look like you're solving a math equation, she said casually. I'm not. Then what are you doing? Thinking. She followed my gaze outside. Her expression didn't change, but something in her eyes sharpened. You've grown up, she said after a moment. That tends to happen. She smiled faintly. Be careful with older men, she added lightly. My heart skipped. What? They can mistake intensity for permanence. I turned to look at her fully. Is that a warning? It's experience. Her tone wasn't accusatory. It was reflective. And for the first time, I wondered if she knew more than she let on. Outside, Adrian laughed at something my dad said. The sound carried through the open window. Familiar. Comfortable. But layered now. This wasn't just attraction anymore. It was momentum. And momentum is dangerous because once it starts rolling, it's harder to stop. Later that night, Adrian texted me for the first time. Not about my dad. Not about logistics. Just 3 words. Are you awake? My pulse spiked as I stared at the screen. Yes, I typed back. A few seconds passed. Then, I've been thinking. I sat up in bed, and I replied. There was a long pause before the next message. If this happens, it won't be halfway. My breath caught. What does that mean? It means I won't treat you like a secret, and I won't treat you like a phase. My heart pounded harder, and I asked again. And it means I have to decide whether I'm ready to lose things. The weight of that settled in my chest. You'd be losing them by choice. I said. Yes. Another pause. And you, he sent. Me what? Are you ready for that? I didn't hesitate. Yes. The typing bubble appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally, I need to see you tomorrow. The words made my stomach flip. Okay. Not at your house. That was new. Where? I'll send you the address. I stared at the message long after the conversation ended. Tomorrow. Something was shifting. This wasn't flirting anymore. This was a decision point. And for the first time since I turned 18, he wasn't retreating. He was moving forward. The address he sent wasn't dramatic. No hidden hotel. No secretive late-night location. It was a quiet cafe about 20 minutes away, one my parents didn't frequent. Neutral ground, which somehow made it feel more serious. I barely slept. Not because I was anxious, because I knew something fundamental was about to shift. The air between us had been tightening for months. This was the moment it either snapped or solidified. I arrived early. I told myself it was to seem composed. In reality, I needed time to study my breathing. When Adrian walked in, he didn't scan the room casually. He looked directly at me, like he already knew where I'd be sitting. He wasn't dressed up, just dark jeans and a fitted sweater. But he looked resolved, not conflicted. Resolved. He sat across from me, leaving the small wooden table between us like a final line of restraint. You look calm, he said. I am. That's unsettling. Why? Because I'm not. That surprised me. You asked me here. Yes. And you're nervous. I'm deciding something, he said evenly. That tends to make people nervous. The waitress came, took our coffee orders, left. Silence followed. Not awkward. Dense. You said if this happens, it won't be halfway, I reminded him. Yes. Are we at the part where you tell me it can't? No. My heart thudded once. Hard. He leaned back slightly, studying me the way he always did when he was analyzing a problem. I need to know something first, he said. What? If I say yes, are you prepared for what that means long-term? I'm not asking for marriage, I replied carefully. I'm asking for honesty. That's not what I meant. Then what do you mean? I mean, if I step into this, I won't step out easily. The implication lingered. He wasn't wired for temporary. And that was exactly why I wanted him. I don't want temporary, I said. You're 18. Stop using that like it invalidates me. I'm not invalidating you. I'm protecting you. From what? Choosing someone older. From choosing someone who will change the way your life unfolds. I want that, I said quietly. His eyes sharpened. You think you do? No, I know I do. He leaned forward slightly now. And when your friends start whispering, I don't live for them. When your father stops looking at me the same way, that's between you and him. When people assume I manipulated you, that one landed heavier. Because that would happen. I'll correct them, I said. You can't correct perception. I can correct truth. His jaw flexed. You're not naive, he muttered. No, that makes this harder. Why? Because if you were naive, I could dismiss this. But I'm not. No. The coffee arrived. Neither of us touched it. The cafe hummed softly around us, but it felt like we were in a vacuum. I didn't plan this, he said finally. I didn't watch you grow up waiting for you to turn 18. I know. I avoided you when I realized I was noticing you differently. I know that too. I hated myself for that. The confession was quiet but sharp. Why? Because I pride myself on control. And you disrupted that. There it was again. Not temptation. Disruption. You're not losing control, I said gently. You're choosing something. That's worse. Why? Because then I'm responsible for the fallout. You would be responsible anyway. Silence. He looked at me like he was weighing the last possible counterargument. And if this destroys my friendship with your father, he asked, then it wasn't strong enough. That startled him. 30 years isn't strong. 30 years should survive honesty. He exhaled slowly. You think he'll understand? I think he loves me. That doesn't answer the question. It does. He stared at me for a long moment. And if he doesn't, then we deal with that. The word hung between us. He noticed it too. You say that like it's simple. It's not simple, I admitted. It's just worth it. That's when something shifted in his expression. The conflict that had been living there for months softened into something else. Acceptance. Not reckless. Not impulsive. but deliberate. He leaned forward fully now, elbows on the table. If I say yes, he said quietly, you don't get to treat this like rebellion. I won't. You don't get to use me to prove you're grown. I don't need to prove that. You don't get to walk away the second it becomes complicated. I won't. And you don't get to resent me later for being older. I won't. You can't promise that. I can promise I'm not choosing blindly. He searched my face one last time. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I didn't try to look seductive or dramatic. I just held his gaze. He nodded slowly. Okay. The word was quiet, but it felt seismic. Okay, I repeated softly. Yes. My pulse thundered in my ears. You're choosing this, I asked. I'm choosing you, he corrected. The world didn't explode. There were no fireworks, just a subtle shift in gravity. He reached across the table, then slowly, deliberately, and rested his hand over mine. Not possessive, not hesitant, intentional. My breath caught at the contact. This wasn't stolen. It wasn't accidental. It was chosen. His thumb brushed lightly against my knuckles. You need to understand something, he said quietly. What? I'm not ashamed of this. The statement stunned me. I thought you were, I admitted. I was afraid of it. That's different. And now? Now I'm afraid of losing you more than I'm afraid of losing reputation. My chest tightened. And my dad? I asked carefully. He didn't pull his hand away. That conversation will be difficult. You're going to tell him? Yes. I blinked. You're not hiding this. No. Relief flooded through me so quickly it almost made me dizzy. I won't sneak around like a teenager, he continued. If we do this, we do it openly. The respect in that decision made something inside me settle. This wasn't a secret affair. This was a man stepping into risk consciously. Are you sure? I asked softly. No, he admitted, but I'm sure about you. The simplicity of it made my throat tighten. We sat there for a long moment, hands intertwined, letting the reality sink in. Everything had changed, and yet it hadn't. He still looked at me the same way. Only now there was no restraint layered over it. Only intention. When do we tell them? I asked. Soon. How soon? I need to choose the right moment. You're stalling. I'm preparing. There was a difference. I squeezed his hand slightly. He squeezed back. Not urgent. Not rushed. Solid. We should go, he said eventually. Back to normal. He almost smiled. There won't be normal. We stood. He didn't let go of my hand immediately. But when we stepped outside into the cool afternoon air, he did. Not because he regretted it, because timing mattered. And for now, the world still didn't know. As he walked me to my car, he stopped, just sort of touching me again. Elena, he said quietly. Yes, if this hurts you. It won't. You don't know that. Neither do you. A faint smile. You're impossible. You like that. He didn't deny it. Instead, he leaned in not to kiss me but close enough that I felt his breath near my ear. I'll talk to your father this week. My heart skipped. Okay. And after that, he added, voice lower now. There's no pretending. I nodded. He stepped back, got into his car, and drove away. I stood there for a long moment, heart racing, mind spinning. This wasn't fantasy anymore. It was real. He had chosen. And now the hardest part was coming. Because loving someone in private is complicated. But loving someone in the open, that's where the real consequences begin. The week felt longer than the 18 years that came before it. Adrian didn't text much after the cafe. Not because he was pulling away, but because he was thinking, preparing, calculating. That was his way. He didn't jump into difficult conversations. He studied them first. Meanwhile, I lived in a strange state of suspended reality. At breakfast, my dad complained about gas prices. At dinner, my mom asked about my classes. Life moved normally, except I was waiting for a collision. 3 days after the cafe, Adrian came over. I knew something was different the moment he walked in. He wasn't relaxed. He wasn't joking. He looked deliberate. Victor, he said after a few minutes of small talk, can we talk outside? My stomach dropped. My father looked surprised but shrugged. Sure. They stepped into the backyard. I stood frozen in the hallway. My mom glanced at me from the kitchen. You look pale, she said casually. I'm fine. She watched me for a second longer than necessary. Then she went back to chopping vegetables. Outside, through the window, I could see them. Adrian standing straight. My dad leaning against the fence, talking. I couldn't hear anything, but I could read body language. At first, my dad looked relaxed, then confused, then still, very still. Adrian didn't look defensive. He didn't look ashamed. He looked steady. My father's posture shifted, arms crossing, then uncrossing, then hands on hips. I'd never realized how much I understood my dad without hearing him. He wasn't angry. Not yet. He was processing. The conversation lasted longer than I expected. 10 minutes, 15, 20. At one point, my father ran a hand through his hair, something he only did when he was overwhelmed. Adrian didn't step back. He didn't retreat. Finally, they both turned toward the house. My pulse spiked so hard I thought I might faint. They walked inside. My dad looked at me. Not furious. Not betrayed. Just searching. Elena, he said. My name sounded different in his mouth. Yeah, come sit down. Adrian stayed standing. I sat on the couch, trying to keep my breathing steady. My mom leaned against the counter, arms folded loosely, watching all three of us. My dad looked at Adrian first. Is this serious? Yes, Adrian said. Not hesitant. Not defensive. Just firm. My father turned to me. And you? Yes. He studied my face like he was looking for coercion, for manipulation, for something that would give him a clear villain. He didn't find one. How long? He asked. I told him how I felt after I turned 18. I said honestly. He rejected me. My dad's eyes flicked to Adrian. You did. Yes. And now? I chose not to keep running, Adrian said. There was something in the way he phrased it that shifted the atmosphere. He wasn't saying, I convinced him. He wasn't saying he lost control. He was saying he made a decision. My father paced once across the room, then back. Jesus, he muttered under his breath. I braced for anger, for yelling, for accusations. Instead, he stopped in front of Adrian. Did you ever look at her that way before she was 18? The question landed heavy. Adrian didn't hesitate. No, not defensive, not offended, just clear. And you're sure about that? Yes. My father held his gaze, years of friendship hanging in that silence. Finally, he nodded once. I didn't realize how much that mattered until I exhaled. My dad turned to me again. You understand what this looks like? He asked. Yes. You understand people will talk? Yes. You understand if he hurts you, I'll bury him. I wouldn't expect less. That almost made him smile. Almost. He looked at Adrian again. You hurt her. We're done. Completely. I won't, Adrian said. Not I'll try. Not I hope not. Just, I won't. Silence filled the room. Then my mom did something unexpected. She laughed softly. All three of us turned to her. What? My dad asked. She shook her head. I'm just remembering being 22, she said lightly. My dad shot her a look. This isn't the same, isn't it? The air shifted. I looked between them. What do you mean? I asked slowly. My mom's expression softened. Before your father and I got married, she said calmly, Adrian and I dated, briefly. The room went silent. I stared at her. What? It was nothing serious, she continued. But it happened. I looked at Adrian. He looked uncomfortable but not ashamed. You never told me that, I said. It didn't matter, my dad said quickly. It was decades ago. How old were you? I asked my mom. 22. And you? I looked at my dad. 39. The number hit like cold water. 17 years. Exactly the same gap. My head spun slightly. You can't be serious, I said. My dad looked annoyed now. That's different. How? Because she wasn't my friend's daughter. So it's about ownership. I shot back. It's about context. It's about ego. Elena. No, really, I said, turning to him fully. If I were a stranger, this wouldn't be a debate. He didn't answer because he knew that was true. My mom stepped forward slightly. Victor, she said gently, you don't get to pretend you were morally superior. He shot her a look, but he didn't argue because she was right. The hypocrisy hung in the air like smoke. Finally, my father exhaled sharply. I don't like it, he said. I know, I replied quietly, but you're not a child. I know. And you, he said to Adrian, are an idiot. Adrian almost smiled. That's fair. My dad ran a hand over his face again. I need time, he muttered. That's reasonable, Adrian said. But if I find out you kept anything from me, my dad warned. We won't, Adrian replied. We? The word landed differently this time. Not secretive, not rebellious, just united. The tension in the room didn't disappear, but it shifted from explosive to manageable. My father wasn't happy, but he wasn't furious either. He was adjusting. And that was more than I'd hoped for. Later that night, after Adrian left, my dad knocked on my bedroom door. Come in, I said. He stepped inside, sitting at the edge of my desk chair. I didn't see this coming, he admitted. I know. Did he ever make you feel uncomfortable growing up? No, not even once. Never. He nodded slowly. That matters, he said quietly. It does. He looked at me, really looked at me. You're not 9 anymore. No. You're not 16. No. You're making this choice. Yes. He sighed. I don't like it, he repeated. But I trust him. That surprised me. You do. Yes. And you trust me. He hesitated for half a second. Mostly. I laughed softly. That's enough. He stood. If this blows up in your face, he warned lightly. Don't say I didn't threaten him first. I won't. After he left, I sat on my bed in silence. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't celebratory, but it wasn't disaster. The door hadn't slammed shut. It had opened, carefully. cautiously. And the next time Adrian came over, it wasn't tense. It wasn't secretive. It was different. When he looked at me, he didn't look away. When he stood close, he didn't step back. My father watched carefully, but he didn't intervene. And for the first time since I was 9 years old, the thing I had carried quietly inside me wasn't a fantasy anymore. It was real, chosen, and out in the open. And that's when I realized something else. The hardest part hadn't been convincing Adrian. It had been stepping into visibility, because now the world could judge it, whisper about it, pick it apart. And that storm was just beginning. Visibility changed everything. Not overnight, not dramatically, but subtly, like the air pressure shifting before weather turns. Adrian didn't come over the next night, or the one after. Not because he was avoiding me, because he was giving my father space, and that restraint mattered. When he did come by that weekend, it wasn't the same as before. There was no sneaking glances, no stolen tension, just open awareness. My father greeted him normally, too normally, the kind of forced normal that meant he was still adjusting. They talked about work, sports, politics. I sat at the dining table reading, hyper-aware of every shift in tone. When Adrian walked into the kitchen to grab a glass of water, I followed. Not dramatically, just naturally. He looked at me as soon as I entered. Not cautious, not defensive, just present. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "Yes, your dad. He's trying." That's more than I expected. "Did you expect him to punch you?" He almost smiled. "I considered it. He trusts you. That's what makes this complicated. You're not betraying him." "I know that," he said softly, "but it still feels like stepping into something sacred." His loyalty to my father wasn't performative. It was real. And that made this heavier, but also more solid. "You're allowed to choose something for yourself," I said. "So are you." There was a quiet weight in those words. For the first time, this didn't feel like rebellion. It felt mutual. Later that evening, something small happened, but it meant everything. We were all sitting in the living room. My mom was flipping through a magazine. My dad had the television on. I sat on the couch. Adrian sat beside me, not touching, just close. And after about 10 minutes of conversation, his hand shifted slightly, not toward me, not away, just resting between us on the cushion. It was subtle, but intentional. He wasn't hiding proximity anymore. My dad noticed. Of course he did. He glanced once, then looked back at the television. He didn't say anything. That silence was louder than anger would have been, because it was permission, cautious permission. When Adrian left that night, he didn't avoid eye contact. He didn't linger dramatically either. He just said, "Good night, Elena." And I replied, "Good night." But the look we shared held weight. We were stepping into this slowly, not recklessly, which made it feel real. A week later, the first crack appeared. Not from my dad, from outside. I was at a cafe with a friend from university when she saw Adrian pick me up. He stepped out of the car to open the passenger door. A small gesture, but noticeable. Her eyebrows lifted. "Wait," she said slowly. "Isn't that your dad's friend?" "Yes." "And he's?" "Yes." Her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. "Are you serious?" "Yes." There it was. The first taste of judgment. "Isn't that weird?" she asked bluntly. "No." He's like, what, 40? 39? That's still. An adult, I cut in calmly. "Just like me." She steadied my face. "You've known him forever." "Yes." "That doesn't bother you?" "No." She hesitated. "Doesn't it feel off?" The word irritated me more than it should have. "Why?" I asked. "Because it doesn't fit what you expect. Because he watched you grow up. He didn't raise me. He didn't parent me. He was around." That's still close. Close isn't the same as inappropriate. She went quiet after that, but the look lingered. Not disgust, just discomfort. And that's when I realized something important. People project their own discomfort onto what they don't understand. That didn't make them right. It just made them loud. That night, I told Adrian about it. We were walking through a park near my house, public, open, visible. "I knew this would happen," he said calmly. "Does it bother you?" "No, it doesn't. People talk about anything unusual. Are we unusual?" "Yes." The honesty made me smile slightly. "And that bothers you?" "No," he said. "What would bother me is if you start doubting yourself because of it." "I won't." "You say that now." "I mean it." He stopped walking then, turned to face me. The evening light caught in his hair. "Elena," he said quietly, "if this ever starts costing you your confidence, you tell me." "It won't." "You don't know that." "Neither do you." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "You're stronger than most people I know," he admitted. I had good influences. A faint smile. We resumed walking, and for the first time since everything began, his hand brushed mine intentionally. Not by accident, not tentative, deliberate. I looked down at our hands, then back up at him. He didn't ask. He didn't hesitate. He just intertwined his fingers with mine. The contact felt steady, grounded, not rushed. We weren't sneaking. We weren't hiding. We were choosing. But visibility has layers. 2 weeks later, my father called me into the garage. Adrian wasn't there. Just him. He leaned against the workbench, arms crossed. "You happy?" He asked bluntly. "Yes." "Really?" "Yes." He studied me. "I've been thinking," he said slowly. "When your mom and I got together, people talked to." "I know." I ignored it. "Because you loved her." He nodded once. "You're not him," he said carefully. "But I see the way he looks at you." My chest tightened slightly. "And it's not casual." "No, that's what scares me." "Why?" "Because serious things can break harder." The statement wasn't a threat. It was concern. "He won't hurt me," I said. "You don't know that." "You don't either." He exhaled. "I trust him," he said finally. "But I trust you more." "That's fair." He paused. "If this ends badly, it won't just be you picking up pieces." "I know." The weight of that settled. This wasn't just a relationship. It was intertwined with decades of friendship, history, family. And yet, I didn't feel regret, only gravity. When Adrian came over later that night, my dad treated him normally. But the air had shifted. Not tense, just aware. And that awareness followed us everywhere. At restaurants, in public, at family gatherings. People looked. Not always openly, but subtly. Curiosity, speculation, disapproval, interest. It didn't break me, but it pressed against me. And then one evening, everything tipped. My parents were supposed to be out of town for the weekend. A last-minute trip to visit relatives. Adrian came over to watch a movie. Nothing dramatic, nothing secret, just normal. We sat on the couch, close, comfortable. His arm eventually draped along the back of the couch behind me. Not possessive, just natural. And for the first time, I leaned into him fully. Not tentative, not testing, choosing. He exhaled softly, his chin resting briefly against the top of my head. It wasn't explosive. It wasn't reckless. It felt right, grounded, steady. Then headlights flashed across the living room window. We both froze. A car door slammed. My stomach dropped. "That's not possible," I whispered. The front door opened. My father's voice carried inside. "Change of plans." My mom followed. Silence filled the room. Adrian's arm slid away slowly. Not guilty, just aware. My parents stepped into the living room and saw us. Not tangled, not inappropriate, but undeniably close. My father's eyes took in the scene. The proximity, the posture, the intimacy of comfort. He didn't explode. He didn't yell. He just stood there, taking it in. My mom's gaze flicked between us, then to my dad, then back. "Well," she said lightly, "that answers that." My father exhaled slowly. "You weren't hiding," he observed. "No," Adrian said calmly. "And you weren't rushing." "No." Silence stretched, thick, heavy. Then my father did something unexpected. He laughed once, short, disbelieving. "I always suspected you had a thing for him," he said to me. My heart skipped. "What?" "You looked at him the same way your mother used to look at me." I blinked. "That's not." And he continued, turning to Adrian. "You've always had a weakness for strong-willed women." That one surprised me. I looked at my mom. She didn't look offended. She looked bemused. "You didn't tell her." My father asked Adrian casually. "Tell me what?" I demanded. Adrian looked almost reluctant. Before he could answer, my mom spoke. "Your father wasn't the only man interested in me when I was younger," she said lightly. The room shifted. I looked at Adrian slowly. "You?" He held my gaze. "It was a long time ago." My heart pounded. "How long?" "Before your father and I got serious." My brain scrambled to rearrange everything I thought I knew. "You dated my mom?" "Briefly," my mom said. "Very briefly." "And then?" I asked. "Then I chose your father," she replied simply. The weight of that settled. Adrian didn't look embarrassed. He looked reflective. My father shrugged. "We were all young," he said. "Things happened. 17 years. The same gap. The same dynamic." And suddenly, the moral high ground felt thinner. I looked at Adrian, at the history layered into him, at the past I hadn't known existed. And something inside me shifted. This wasn't just slightly taboo anymore. It was complicated in ways I hadn't anticipated. And for the first time since we began this, I felt the ground tilt slightly beneath my feet. The weekend that followed my parents' surprise return felt surreal. Adrian stayed the night not in some hidden corner, not sneaking into my room, but in the guest room, officially, openly. The tension that had always hovered between us was gone, replaced with something slower, something heavier, expectation. Now that my parents were home, the stakes had shifted. Nothing about this was private anymore. yet no one spoke about it. That unspoken acknowledgement made everything more intimate, more real. Breakfast that Sunday morning was quiet. My dad flipped the newspaper and muttered about the stock market. My mom sipped coffee with her usual calm detachment, but I could see her eyes flicking occasionally toward Adrian and me. My chest tightened with every glance they knew. They had known longer than I realized. Adrian reached across the table and brushed my hand lightly. It wasn't a public display. No one flinched, but that simple touch made my heart lurch. Later, while helping my dad in the garage, Adrian worked beside me silently, occasionally offering advice or joking lightly. It felt normal, comfortable, like he belonged there. Like this was just another layer of our lives blending together. But the awareness of my parents' presence lingered, like a subtle hum under everything. That afternoon, my mom asked me to help with some gardening. I led her into the backyard, where Adrian and my dad were fixing the fence. My mom stopped beside me and leaned lightly against the railing. "You look happy," she said softly. "I am," I admitted. "You're aware of the consequences, right?" she asked. Her tone was casual, but her eyes searched mine. "Yes," I replied. "That's good," she said. "You're not acting out of rebellion." I nodded. "I know what I want. I've known for a long time." Her lips quirked into a faint smile. "I suspected as much. He's been very disciplined. More than I imagined," I said quietly. She laughed softly. "Discipline can be exhausting, but it's also honest." I realized then that she understood, in a way my dad never would, the gravity of what Adrian and I were stepping into. My mother had been young once too, navigating the delicate balance between desire and propriety. And now, in subtle ways, she was passing that understanding to me. That evening, Adrian and I were alone in my room. My parents had gone to bed early after a long day of travel. The room felt smaller somehow, cozier. "I can't stop thinking about that moment in the cafe," I admitted, sitting on the edge of my bed. "When you said you'd never treat this halfway." He leaned against the doorframe, hands in his pockets, gaze fixed on me. "I meant it." "I know," I said softly, "but now everything is different." He nodded slowly. "It is. Public acknowledgement changes the dynamic. We can't slip into the background anymore." I swallowed, heart racing. "I don't want to hide. Not from anyone." "You won't," he said. "Not from me, not from your family." The honesty in his voice made my chest ache. There was no hesitation, no false modesty. He was fully aware of the risks, yet he still chose me. That kind of certainty was rare, intoxicating. I stepped closer to him, drawn by gravity I couldn't resist. "I've wanted this for so long," I whispered. He exhaled softly, running a hand down his face. "I've fought it for months. I wasn't sure I had the right to feel this way, but now I can't ignore it." Our eyes locked, and for a moment, the air between us became a tangible thing. It wasn't just attraction. It was history, desire, secrecy, and now acknowledgement, all pressing in simultaneously. "I don't want this to be taboo," I said quietly. "I want it to be real." "It is real," he said firmly. "It will be complicated, yes, but it's real." We were both quiet for a moment, letting the weight of the confession settle. Then, impulsively, I reached out and took his hand. He didn't pull away. Instead, he intertwined his fingers with mine, slow and deliberate. "I don't want to be afraid of it anymore," I admitted. "You won't be," he said softly. "I'll make sure of that." The intimacy of that promise pressed against me in ways nothing else had. I felt grounded, safe, and yet every nerve in my body was alive with tension. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I realized something terrifying, loving. Adrian Opally wasn't just about the thrill of secrecy. It was about merging two complicated histories, two worlds that had never intersected before in this way. My parents knew. The boundaries were clear. And yet, there was no turning back. Because this wasn't just infatuation anymore. It was choice. And every choice carried consequences. By the time I drifted to sleep, I knew one thing. The real challenges hadn't started yet. Visibility wasn't the danger. Desire wasn't the danger. The danger lay in the collision of love, loyalty, and expectation, and I was standing squarely in its path. And I wouldn't step away. The following week was a minefield I hadn't anticipated. Adrian and I didn't speak much about the cafe or the open acknowledgement again. That wasn't needed. Our choices were already visible. My parents had given their tacit permission, but the real world had its own rules. The first time I felt the weight of it was at university. I arrived late for a lecture and saw a cluster of students whispering, glancing in my direction. One of them, a girl I barely knew, gave me a pointed look, her expression a mixture of disbelief and curiosity. "You're serious?" she asked when we were alone later. "Yes," I replied. "About what?" "About him. The fact that I'm dating him." "Yes. Are you?" "Yes." Her eyes widened. "Wow, that's complicated." I shrugged. "It's my life. Doesn't it feel wrong?" she asked, hesitation heavy in her voice. "He's older. He's your dad's friend. People will talk." "I don't care what people think," I said firmly. "Not anymore." But the whispers didn't stop. and with them came judgment, assumptions, subtle questions. Some tried to be polite, others less so. For the first time, I realized how complicated it was to be visible not just to friends, but to anyone who had an opinion about age, propriety, or loyalty. Adrian noticed too. That evening, he came over, and we sat together in my room, hands brushing occasionally, tentative but intentional. "You noticed," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Of course," I replied. "It's impossible not to." He exhaled slowly. "I thought if we stayed private for a little while longer, it would be easier." "Easier for who?" I asked. "You, maybe. But I've wanted this for years. I don't want easier. I want real." He studied me, jaw tight. "I do too. I just didn't expect the scrutiny to hit this fast." "Scrutiny isn't the problem," I said softly. "The problem is letting it shape how we feel about each other. I won't let anyone make me doubt us." "I won't either," he admitted. "But I'm human. I can feel tension, curiosity, judgment. It's exhausting sometimes. I can handle it," I said. "And I think you can too. That's why we're here." We sat together in silence, letting the intensity settle around us. The intimacy wasn't reckless, but it was undeniable. The real test came when my parents decided to host a casual dinner with Adrian included. I had imagined the scenario countless times in my head. I expected awkwardness, judgment, silent disapproval. Instead, my dad treated him normally. My mom joked lightly about cooking disasters. Adrian smiled easily, blending into the family in ways that made my heart swell. And yet, when I looked around, I realized the undercurrent was unavoidable. Neighbors, extended family, friends, they all sensed it. There were subtle glances, half-formed questions, curiosity tempered with polite silence. After dinner, while clearing the table with my mom, she leaned close and whispered, "You realize this is going to get louder soon." "I know," I said, "but I've chosen it." "You're brave," she said softly. More than I expected. Her approval, subtle as it was, mattered more than anything. Later that night, Adrian and I were alone in the living room. The house quiet, the tension of the outside world momentarily absent. "I can't wait for things to be easier," I admitted, "for judgment to fade." He reached for my hand. "We can't control that. Only us, only what we do together." I nodded, letting the simplicity of that truth sink in. And then, impulsively, I leaned closer. He didn't pull away. Not immediately. His eyes searched mine for hesitation, doubt, or fear. He found none. "I've wanted this forever," I whispered. "And I've resisted it," he said. "For months, years even. But I can't anymore." The words were heavy, charged, not reckless, not fleeting. Intense, deliberate, undeniable. I tilted my head, brushing my lips lightly against his. He froze, just for a moment, then closed the distance, finally letting himself kiss me fully. The world narrowed to just us. And in that moment, all the judgment, all the scrutiny, all the potential fallout disappeared. For the first time, it felt like it wasn't just desire. It was belonging. Because for years, I had loved him quietly, secretly, hoping, dreaming, watching, and now, finally, he had chosen me to not as a moment of weakness, not as temptation, but as intention. And that was intoxicating. The first ripple came the morning after the kiss. Adrian stayed until late, and I could still feel the warmth of him beside me as I made breakfast. The air in the house felt charged, like everything was waiting to shift. I thought my parents might make a comment, but they didn't. My dad read the paper in silence, occasionally glancing over the top at me. And my mom sipped her coffee with a faint smile. They weren't oblivious, they were just letting it be. But the outside world wasn't so forgiving. It started with text messages from friends at university. A few asking cautiously, "Is it true?" Most assuming, whispering, spreading rumors before they even knew details. Social media followed. A photo someone snapped of me and Adrian sitting too close at a cafe spread like wildfire. Comments, some neutral, some biting, some judgmental. I felt it immediately, the pressure of visibility. It wasn't fear. It wasn't shame. It was attention, subtle but insistent, pressing on me from all directions. Adrian noticed it too. He came over later that day, and the moment he saw me, he knew. "They're talking," he said quietly, dropping onto the couch beside me. "I know," I replied. "I've known since the text started." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "I hate this part. I hate that people can make us feel watched." I nodded, "But we can't control it. We can only control how we respond." "That's easy for you to say," he muttered. "You're 18. You don't have the same history tied to me. That makes it harder for you," I said softly. "But it doesn't make it wrong. And it doesn't change how I feel." His eyes softened. He leaned closer and brushed his lips briefly against mine. "You're fearless," he whispered. "I'm not," I admitted. "Not really. I'm just done hiding." For a long time, we sat like that, silent, intertwined, comfortable, and yet acutely aware of everything around us. Every notification, every glance, every whispered rumor outside. These walls felt like a tiny pulse against our bubble. The next challenge came when my father invited Adrian to a weekend gathering at a friend's country house. The plan was simple, casual, family-friendly. But once Adrian arrived, the subtle judgment of others became impossible to ignore. Glances, pauses in conversation when he entered the room, faint murmurs, behind-hand dull reactions to what everyone had already seen online or assumed. I noticed it too, and I felt a rush of protectiveness I didn't expect. At one point, someone made a passing joke about age differences and friendship boundaries. Adrian's jaw tightened, and I felt the sting of it as if it were directed at me. I slipped my hand into his under the table. His fingers curled around mine. That simple act grounded us, a quiet rebellion against the judgment pressing in from every angle. Later that night, as the gathering wound down, we walked outside under a sky full of stars. The night air was crisp, carrying a faint scent of pine and damp earth. "You okay?" I asked softly. He exhaled slowly. "I'm fine, just aware of what people think, of what my choices mean. Don't let it scare you," I said. "We can't control them, only us." "I know," he admitted, "but it's not just them. It's history. My friendship with your dad, the way it all intertwines. You've made a choice," I reminded him, "and I've made mine. We can't undo that." He nodded, eyes searching mine. "I know, it's just complicated." "Yes," I agreed. "Complicated, but worth it." He reached out and pulled me into a gentle embrace, resting his chin on my shoulder. I didn't realize how much this would feel different when it went public. "It's not just public," I said softly. "It's real. And real is harder, but better." We stood there for a long time, letting the cool night air wash over us. The world was noisy, opinionated, and judgmental, but in that moment, it didn't matter. Not the gossip, not the assumptions, not the scrutiny, because we had each other. And that, finally, felt like enough. But the following week proved that the outside world had its own plans. A distant relative posted a vague comment online, hinting at inappropriate attachments and scandals. Messages flooded in, some accusatory, others incredulous. Friends, classmates, acquaintances all adding their voices to the murmur. I felt the tension creep in, subtle at first, then pressing. My chest tightened, every text like a small shock. Adrian noticed it immediately. "Don't let them get to you," he said firmly. "They don't define this. They already are," I admitted. "Even if I ignore them, the words exist. And they can't touch what we have," he said, voice low. "Only us, only reality." I leaned into him, needing the reassurance. "Reality's messy," I whispered. "Yes," he agreed. "But real isn't fragile. It's persistent. It survives judgment." That night, as we lay together quietly, I realized that desire had shifted into something heavier, responsibility. The public eye, my family, Adrian's history with my father, they all weighed on us. But within that weight was intimacy, trust, and choice. And it was intoxicating, because love wasn't just emotion anymore. It was defiance, acknowledgement, and courage. And for the first time, I understood that the most complicated things often carry the deepest reward. The weeks that followed became a test not of love, not of desire, but of endurance. Adrian and I had navigated secrecy, acknowledgement, and now the quiet scrutiny of everyone around us. At first, I thought I was ready for judgment. I thought I could withstand whispered comments, raised eyebrows, even the occasional bold question from classmates. But reality was sharper, more insistent, and far more exhausting than I'd imagined. It began subtly. A few friends at university stopped texting me as much. Some who had once joked with me about boys now skirted the topic when I mentioned Adrian. Social media was a minefield. Every post, every story, every casual photo became a point of speculation. A simple comment, interesting choice could send a ripple of anxiety through me. I tried to brush it off, but one afternoon, in the quiet of my dorm room, it all hit me at once. My phone buzzed constantly. Notifications piling up, messages from friends, classmates, and even strangers commenting on a photo someone had tagged of Adrian and me at a cafe. The captions varied, some playful, some incredulous, some subtly accusatory. I dropped my phone onto the bed, exhaling sharply. The tension in my chest felt like a physical weight. "You okay?" Adrian's voice came from the doorway. He hadn't knocked. He never did. I looked up to see him leaning against the frame, hands in his pockets, eyes immediately scanning me like he could read the turmoil inside. "I'm fine," I said, but the words felt hollow. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Doesn't feel like it," he said quietly, moving closer. I shook my head, sitting on the edge of the bed. "It's just everything. People talking, judging, always judging." He crouched in front of me, taking my hands gently in his. "Elena, listen. They can say whatever they want. It doesn't touch what we have. Not really." "I know," I whispered, "but it still gets to me. It's everywhere. Even at home. I can feel people thinking about it." He tilted his head, a faint frown forming. "Then we deal with it together. Every step, every whisper, every look. We don't hide, and we don't run. That's how we survive this." His words, simple but firm, grounded me. I nodded slowly, letting his certainty anchor the storm inside me. That night, we walked through the quiet streets near my house, hand in hand. The sky was dark, and the air smelled faintly of rain. We didn't speak much, only letting the silence stretch, filled with shared understanding. Eventually, we found ourselves sitting on a low wall by the park, shoulders touching. He looked at me with a seriousness I hadn't seen before. Elena, he began, I need to be honest. Being with you, it's different. Not just because of the outside world. It's because I've wanted this for so long and resisted for so long. I've always been careful, too careful. But now I'm not. And that scares me as much as it excites me. I leaned closer, brushing my fingers along his. I understand. I'm not naive. I know what this means, what it could cost us. But I wanted it to, and I'm not backing down. He exhaled, a mix of relief and tension. You've changed me, he admitted. I thought I could never, but you've made me realize that some things are worth breaking rules for. I laughed softly, leaning my head against his shoulder. Some things, yes, but we still have to navigate this carefully. He nodded, holding me closer. Carefully, yes, but together. The weeks blurred as we learned that lesson. Every public appearance, every message, every whispered comment tested our patience. Friends who had once been allies turned skeptical. My father watched with a cautious, protective eye, while my mother remained quietly observant, always offering subtle guidance. One evening, Adrian brought up something I hadn't anticipated. You're aware, he said softly, that not everyone will ever accept this. Some people will resist, judge, or resent it. And some of it may come from the people closest to us. I know, I said, but I'm ready. I want to try. I want us. He paused, staring at me, his thumb brushing over the back of my hand. Elena, being with you isn't just desire. It's responsibility, emotion, history, people's expectations. I need to be fully certain you're ready for it too. I am, I said, heart pounding. I've waited for this my whole life. His gaze softened and he leaned forward to press a gentle kiss to my forehead. Then we'll face it all, together. That night, I lay awake, thinking about how far we'd come. From secret glances when I was 9, to whispered conversations when I turned 18, to public acknowledgement and judgment. Every step had been fraught with tension, secrecy, and desire, but also with trust, understanding, and mutual choice. I realized then that the real challenge wasn't the outside world. It was navigating the depth of our own emotions while resisting the pull of fear and uncertainty. The world could judge, whisper, and speculate all it wanted, but inside, in that quiet space between Adrian and me, the rules were different. Because love wasn't just emotion anymore. It was defiance, courage, and intention. And it was just beginning. It started with a single message, a forwarded post from an extended family WhatsApp group. I was scrolling casually when I saw my aunt's comment, "Have you seen Elena with Adrian?" I never expected this from our family. My chest tightened. My phone slipped from my hands, and a small buzz of notifications escalated into a storm. Screenshots, whispers, forwarded posts within minutes. The reach was everywhere. My extended family was abuzz. Some curious, some disapproving, some openly judgmental. I tried to stay calm, but my hands shook. I looked up to see Adrian watching me quietly from the doorway, his expression unreadable. "They're talking," I whispered. "I can see that," he said softly, moving closer. His hand found mine instinctively. I didn't expect this," I admitted. "I thought if we were careful, at least some people would understand." He shook his head gently. "Careful isn't enough sometimes. People are loud. People project their fears onto what they don't understand. Even family?" I asked bitterly. "Especially family," he said. "They feel entitled to opinions about the people closest to you. But we can't let it define us." I took a shaky breath, grounding myself in his presence. "You're right. I didn't anticipate the storm hitting this hard." Adrian pulled me into a hug, holding me tight. "Then we face it together," he whispered. "No one gets to decide for us, only us." The following weekend, my parents hosted a casual gathering. My cousins, aunts, and uncles. Adrian and I arrived together, hands brushing lightly as we entered. Almost immediately, I felt the weight of judgment in the room. Eyes lingered too long. Conversations paused when we approached. Whispers followed our every move. I kept my head high, letting Adrian guide me gently through the crowd. My dad intercepted a few subtle questions, redirecting the focus with casual jokes. My mom observed quietly, occasionally flashing me a supportive smile. And then it happened. One of my older cousins, emboldened by alcohol and a false sense of privacy, leaned close and whispered, loud enough for half the room to hear, "Is it true? Are you really involved with him?" The air froze. Adrian's hand tightened around mine instinctively. My heart raced, a mix of fear and exhilaration. "Yes," I said firmly, lifting my chin. "We are." A stunned silence followed. Then murmurs, questions, judgmental glances. One aunt shook her head in disbelief. Adrian stepped forward, calm but commanding. "I'm aware this is unexpected. I've thought about it carefully. I'm involved with Elena because I choose to be. I've never been clearer about anything in my life. The room was silent, everyone absorbing the weight of his words. My cousins didn't argue. My aunts didn't challenge. For once, the boldness of truth cut through speculation. After the initial tension passed, I realized something. This confrontation, awkward, slightly chaotic, but honest, shifted everything. People couldn't whisper behind our backs anymore. We had chosen visibility, and now it was time to own it fully. Later, Adrian and I walked outside into the crisp night air, away from the crowd. My hand found his, and he didn't hesitate. "You handled that well," I said softly. "So did you," he replied, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "We did it together." I leaned into him, feeling the weight of the evening lift slightly. I didn't expect it to feel so intense. "Intensity doesn't make it wrong," he said. "It makes it real." I smiled faintly. "You're right, but sometimes real is terrifying." And sometimes, he whispered, real is exactly what you need. That night, lying together quietly, I realized how far we come. From secret glances to public acknowledgement, from whispered confessions to facing judgment head-on. Every step had been fraught with tension, desire, and courage. The storm outside wasn't going away. The gossip, the judgment, the occasional stares that would follow us. But within the quiet of Adrian's arms, the world could rage all it wanted. Because we had each other. And for the first time, I understood. Love wasn't just desire. It was defiance. It was courage. It was standing tall when everyone else whispered doubts. And we were ready for whatever came next. By the time the following week rolled around, everything had changed yet. Somehow, nothing had. Adrian and I had weathered judgment, whispers, and the curious stares of extended family. We had faced public acknowledgement, confronted speculation, and even endured the small, cutting comments of friends who couldn't understand. And through it all, we had remained steadfast. Hand in hand, eyes aligned, hearts synchronized. The day began quietly, almost deceptively ordinary. I woke to the soft hum of morning light spilling through my bedroom curtains. Adrian was already awake, sitting in the chair by the window with a mug of coffee, looking out over the yard. I watched him for a moment, memorizing the slope of his shoulders, the way the light caught his hair. I felt the familiar flutter, the same one I carried for years, amplified now by what we had built together. "Morning," I said softly. He turned, offering me that small, tender smile that always made my chest tighten. "Morning," he replied. "Sleep well." "Better than I have in a long time," I admitted. "Everything feels different now." "It is different," he said, rising to pour me a cup of coffee. "But it's good different. Real different." We sipped in quiet contentment, letting the world take shape around us without intrusion. It was in these moments, calm yet charged, that the weight of our journey hit me. From secret childhood glances to bold, public acknowledgement, from whispered confessions to confronting judgment directly. We had arrived at something fragile, solid, and undeniable. Later that afternoon, my parents returned from a brief trip. There had been no warnings, no precautions, only the routine of everyday life. They found us in the living room, seated together, books and papers scattered, our hands entwined naturally on the arm of the couch. "Looks like someone's comfortable," my father said dryly, though the corner of his mouth twitched in the slightest hint of amusement. I glanced at Adrian, whose face was neutral, but eyes held a subtle softness. My mother, as always, offered a faint smile of approval, as though the years of observation had culminated in this moment of quiet acknowledgement. "Yes," I said simply. "We're comfortable." The next challenge came unexpectedly. A weekend getaway with some of our friends from university. I had assumed that once things were public, the awkwardness would fade, but reality was never so simple. Conversations turned cautious. Stares lingered. Questions surfaced, whispered but persistent. Adrian remained my anchor through it all. Every time someone's eyes lingered too long, every time speculation threatened to rise in tone, his hand found mine, grounding me, reminding me that our bond was stronger than gossip, judgment, or societal expectation. It wasn't just protection. It was affirmation. We were intentional. We were deliberate. And in that clarity, we thrived. One evening, after returning from a long walk along a quiet stretch of the lakeside near campus, Adrian turned to me. His expression carried the weight of sincerity and something deeper, reflection of the journey we had endured. "Elena," he began, voice low, careful, "I want you to know, through all of it, every comment, every whisper, every judgment, I've never wavered. Never once have I doubted this. Us, you." I felt my chest tighten, emotion lacing every word he hadn't spoken. "I've never doubted either," I said softly. "Even when it felt impossible, even when the world seemed against us, I never doubted you." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering on my cheek. "Then we have something rare, something worth every risk, every stare, every moment of tension." The moment stretched, delicate and unbroken. Then, without hesitation, Adrian leaned in, capturing my lips with his in a kiss that was both gentle and fierce. A culmination of years of longing, of quiet yearning, of hidden desire finally acknowledged. It was not reckless. It was deliberate. It was the embodiment of everything we had built: trust, patience, courage, and desire intertwined into something wholly our own. When we finally pulled away, breath mingling, foreheads touching, I realized the truth. This wasn't just desire anymore. This wasn't just the thrill of secrecy or the taboo of a forbidden affection. This was love complex, slightly taboo, fiercely real, and undeniable. The days that followed were quieter, but no less intense. We moved forward deliberately, publicly where necessary, privately when we needed the intimacy that the world could not touch. The whispers persisted, as they always would, but they no longer dictated how I felt or how Adrian acted. We had passed the threshold. Desire had become trust. Tension had become security. And secrecy had become choice. On one evening, as we sat together in the quiet of my room, hands entwined and shoulders brushing, I felt the weight of years lift. All the unspoken feelings, the longing from childhood, the dreams of this moment it had all culminated here. Do you ever regret it? I asked quietly, voice almost lost in the soft hum of the room. He shook his head, brushing his thumb across my hand. Never. Every moment the waiting, the tension, the fear, it all led to this. And this, us, is worth everything. I nodded, leaning into him, letting the warmth of his presence envelop me. It's worth everything, I whispered back. And in that stillness, in the intimacy that was ours alone, I understood something profoundly simple. Love, especially the kind that survives judgment, time, and fear, isn't reckless. It's deliberate. It's patient. It's courageous. We had crossed the line from longing to reality, from tension to intimacy, from secrecy to deliberate acknowledgement. And nothing, no whisper, no glance, no opinion, could take that away from us. That night, as I lay in Adrian's arms, I closed my eyes and felt the weight of the journey finally settle. Years of longing, curiosity, hesitation, and defiance had led to this. A love both slightly taboo and fiercely real, grounded in trust, choice, and undeniable desire. And in that moment, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. We had arrived, together, and nothing else mattered. By the time the following week rolled around, everything had changed yet. Somehow, nothing had. Adrian and I had weathered judgment, whispers, and the curious stares of extended family. We had faced public acknowledgement, confronted speculation, and even endured the small, cutting comments of friends who couldn't understand. And through it all, we had remained steadfast, hand in hand, eyes aligned, hearts synchronized. The day began quietly, almost deceptively ordinary. I woke to the soft hum of morning light spilling through my bedroom curtains. Adrian was already awake, sitting in the chair by the window with a mug of coffee, looking out over the yard. I watched him for a moment, memorizing the slope of his shoulders, the way the light caught his hair. I felt the familiar flutter, the same one I carried for years, amplified now by what we had built together. Morning, I said softly. He turned, offering me that small, tender smile that always made my chest tighten. Morning, he replied. Sleep well. Better than I have in a long time, I admitted. Everything feels different now. It is different, he said, rising to pour me a cup of coffee. But it's good different, real different. We sipped in quiet contentment, letting the world take shape around us without intrusion. It was in these moments, calm yet charged, that the weight of our journey hit me. From secret childhood glances to bold, public acknowledgement, from whispered confessions to confronting judgment directly. We had arrived at something fragile, solid, and undeniable. Later that afternoon, my parents returned from a brief trip. There had been no warnings, no precautions, only the routine of everyday life. They found us in the living room, seated together, books and papers scattered, our hands entwined naturally on the arm of the couch. Looks like someone's comfortable, my father said dryly, though the corner of his mouth twitched in the slightest hint of amusement. I glanced at Adrian, whose face was neutral, but eyes held a subtle softness. My mother, as always, offered a faint smile of approval, as though the years of observation had culminated in this moment of quiet acknowledgement. Yes, I said simply. We're comfortable. The next challenge came unexpectedly. A weekend getaway with some of our friends from university. I had assumed that once things were public, the awkwardness would fade, but reality was never so simple. Conversations turned cautious. Stares lingered. Questions surfaced, whispered but persistent. Adrian remained my anchor through it all. Every time someone's eyes lingered too long, every time speculation threatened to rise in tone, his hand found mine, grounding me, reminding me that our bond was stronger than gossip, judgment, or societal expectation. It wasn't just protection. It was affirmation. We were intentional. We were deliberate. And in that clarity, we thrived. One evening, after returning from a long walk along a quiet stretch of the lakeside near campus, Adrian turned to me. His expression carried the weight of sincerity and something deeper reflection of the journey we had endured. Elena, he began, voice low, careful. I want you to know, through all of it, every comment, every whisper, every judgment, I've never wavered. Never once have I doubted this. Us, you. I felt my chest tighten, emotion lacing every word he hadn't spoken. I've never doubted either, I said softly. Even when it felt impossible. Even when the world seemed against us, I never doubted you. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering on my cheek. Then we have something rare, something worth every risk, every stare, every moment of tension. The moment stretched, delicate and unbroken. Then, without hesitation, Adrian leaned in, capturing my lips with his in a kiss that was both gentle and fierce. A culmination of years of longing, of quiet yearning, of hidden desire finally acknowledged. It was not reckless. It was deliberate. It was the embodiment of everything we had built: trust, patience, courage, and desire intertwined into something wholly our own. When we finally pulled away, breath mingling, foreheads touching, I realized the truth. This wasn't just desire anymore. This wasn't just the thrill of secrecy or the taboo of a forbidden affection. This was love complex, slightly taboo, fiercely real, and undeniable. The days that followed were quieter, but no less intense. We moved forward deliberately, publicly where necessary, privately when we needed the intimacy that the world could not touch. The whispers persisted, as they always would, but they no longer dictated how I felt or how Adrian acted. We had passed the threshold. Desire had become trust, tension had become security, and secrecy had become choice. On one evening, as we sat together in the quiet of my room, hands entwined and shoulders brushing, I felt the weight of years lift. All the unspoken feelings, the longing from childhood, the dreams of this moment it had all culminated here. Do you ever regret it? I asked quietly, voice almost lost in the soft hum of the room. He shook his head, brushing his thumb across my hand. Never. Every moment the waiting, the tension, the fear, it all led to this. And this, us, is worth everything. I nodded, leaning into him, letting the warmth of his presence envelop me. It's worth everything, I whispered back. And in that stillness, in the intimacy that was ours alone, I understood something profoundly simple. Love, especially the kind that survives judgment, time, and fear, isn't reckless. It's deliberate. It's patient. It's courageous. We had crossed the line from longing to reality, from tension to intimacy, from secrecy to deliberate acknowledgement. And nothing, no whisper, no glance, no opinion, could take that away from us. That night, as I lay in Adrian's arms, I closed my eyes and felt the weight of the journey finally settle. Years of longing, curiosity, hesitation, and defiance had led to this. A love both slightly taboo and fiercely real, grounded in trust, choice, and undeniable desire. And in that moment, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. We had arrived, together, and nothing else mattered.